Hi, welcome back to the MDS Guru podcast. I'm your host, Melinda Renshaw. Today, we're diving into the realities of Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement from the administrator's perspective. Joining me is Dee Schaefer, seasoned long-term care administrator, who's going to share her firsthand insights on what works, what doesn't, how it's impacted her facility, and how she continually adapts to the changing landscape. So whether you're MDS or DON or administrator, you're going to want to hear this. Welcome, Dee, and thanks for joining.
Well, thank you very much, Melinda. It's nice talking to you.
There's been a lot of change, as you know, and it continues to change. Nothing seems to be set in stone. It's always evolving, and it is difficult to get concrete answers when we try to press for them so that we don't make mistakes. I have come up with a few questions, and I would just like your best insight on this. To start out with, over the years, we've had a lot of regulatory changes. What reimbursement change for Medicare or Medicaid, in your opinion, has impacted long-term care the most?
Yeah, well, I will definitely say PDPM has impacted the reimbursement quite a bit, obviously. And, that was introduced back in 2019,
Yes.
on the heels of RUGS 4 for years and years and years. And obviously that was completely different methodology. So it was, turning everything up, on its head. So that really impacted things a lot. And then all of a sudden, as soon as we were kind of just starting out with PDPM, then COVID hit. So that pretty much put everybody on a completely different path, and then that was years of dealing with COVID. And so then all of a sudden when COVID settled, we had to go back to PDPM and we're like, okay, what did we learn? So we had to kind of relearn it a little bit, I think, in 2022, 2023. But, I think that was just a huge change and there was a lot of complexity to it. Like I said, I think it was completely different than RUGS 4. So a huge learning curve. And then dealing with the COVID, obviously. But in Missouri in particular, I think Medicaid has really been a huge change for providers. They switched from, just kind of the base rate it was completely underfunded for decades. And then they obviously went to a case mix system in, I believe, July of 2022. And that was really huge for the state of Missouri, and kudos to everybody that worked on that. But, I think Missouri Medicaid and patients funded through Medicaid has been, terribly underfunded forever. It really didn't permit any opportunity to obtain any reimbursement to cover substantial costs of care, because we have very sick, ill patients that have very, high needs. So I think that moving into a case mix system through Medicaid actually allows providers the opportunity to really focus on their acuity, what their true acuity levels are, and then pursue increased reimbursement, to cover some of those expenses. So I think that those two things really has impacted me as a provider quite a bit, actually, in the last few years.
I, as a nurse, was glad to see the shift from therapy-based payment systems, RUGS 44 was that, to the case mix index, because I would like to see the facilities get more reimbursement for the complex nursing items they do.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't always that way, as you know. With the Medicaid reimbursement, when it comes to acuity and case mix, what do you think is the most challenging with Medicaid?
I think when everybody thinks about a post-acute care or a nursing facility, their minds automatically go to nursing home. And when they think nursing home, and obviously we are a long-term care provider, there's no question about that. But a lot of people think I think by default or just naturally think, oh, it's a nursing facility, so they just need to focus on bingo and rocking chairs, and I'm not trying to dismiss the, life enrichment needs of patients at all, because those things are very important. But I think what's missing is, very few realize the profound healthcare complexities that we're responsible for. Very few. I think that there's just an image in people's minds, and they don't even take into consideration the fact that we have very, very fragile individuals. We have people that have substantial physical limitations and have a lot of complex, comorbidities that we are literally responsible for. You add that into this wildly complex system that we have of monitoring and tracking and reporting and compliance platforms through, CMS and the state government. It's really paralyzing. I think those are really some of our biggest challenges. It's just the complexity of our patient population and, trying to figure that in with the complexity of these multiple platforms that we have to navigate. It really is a massive challenge. But, I think that it's really, these realities have made it difficult for us to really capture the acuity levels that we have. And it's just complex and cumbersome. So those are really big. I think those are really big challenges for us.
It is. And now that we have PDPM, do you think your facility has changed the way they approach Medicare residents?
Yes, absolutely. We really take a look at, obviously, which we always have, but we sort of, go through our referrals with more of a fine-tooth comb, so to speak, kind of dive deeper into their, history and physical. What kind of diagnoses do they have? What are they dealing with? What comorbidities are they looking at or are they dealing with? So that we actually have to look at those things if we want to really truly meet their needs, and then also make sure that we maximize the opportunity to tap into that reimbursement that may be available. So we do look at all of our referrals. We look at all of our admissions. We dive into their history. We look at all of the possible diagnoses that we can. And then we monitor their care along the way while they're with us. Because if something changes, perhaps there's another opportunity to capture a new diagnosis, or if there's an interruption in their stay, then obviously we have to stay on top of that to make sure, was there a new diagnosis added? Do we need to capture that? What does that do to the calculations that bring about their reimbursement through their diagnoses? It's so critical. As an administrator, I don't want to just get caught up just us doing it. We're, day in and day out. I have, contracted with consultant, which is you, to overlook and take a look at what we're doing day to day and put your eye on it to make sure that we're not overlooking something, and that you can kind of give us, your perspective as well, because it's just that important. I mean, it's not something that we can let's just hope we get the codes right and let's just hit submit through MDS. It is not like that anymore. And there's a lot of self-inflicted wounds for people that approach it that way.
That is true. There have been several articles written about it. You cannot just have an MDS coordinator anymore. It's too complex and ever changing. I know that you have meetings weekly. So how do you ensure that your MDS coding is optimal and that you have the documentation for all of that?
We have a lot of meetings, and I know that can be, people roll their eyes when they hear about meetings, but there's a huge administrative burden to this, but it's well worth it because you really have to know what you're doing. You have to be strategic, and you have to focus on certain things in order to capture your reimbursement, the reimbursement that's available to you. There is no way that it's magically going to appear, and you're just going to probably go backwards if you have that mindset. But yes, we do have a lot of meetings. Like I said, we do look at the admissions piece of it, and we also, for a long time, we would have, when they made the changes with PDPM and they made the changes with case mix in Missouri through Medicaid, we got our hands on all of the literature, all the education that we could, and we would meet regularly as a team and go over it. And then as we went through things, we were able to kind of see a system kind of come into focus, and what can we do internally to streamline our processes to make sure that we are in compliance with these new regulations or these new parameters. So we would have daily meetings to take a look at who is due and who is coming up with their MDS with either submission or quarterly. What is their 7-day ARD date? And I would have the MDS coordinator make sure, obviously, that they got that information out to all of the IDT members so that they could have their parts pulled together and validated. And then we would, as a group, look at those pieces of information daily to make sure that, what grouping is this person in? Is this appropriate? Are they in the right group? Do we have, what diagnosis constitutes them being in that particular group? And if that diagnosis is what is getting them in that group, let's look in their chart and can we validate it? Is that information there? And then can we validate that diagnosis for this ARD date? And so we were doing that and have been doing that for quite some time. There's deadlines and kind of, I don't know what the word is, but just this mix of signature dates and when we have to sign something and when we can't sign something. Do we sign it before? Do we sign it on? Do we do it after the ARD date?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of targets there. So we sit there and every single day when we meet and we look at these signature dates and who's responsible. and we set a time at the end, towards the end of the day. So everybody knows we're going to be looking at these particular MDSs, and we're going to be looking at signatures. Did the functional assessments get done? Are they done timely? And we're all going to be in the same room at the same time. So everybody feels like we better have that done before we actually meet, because we have to have it done. It's just non-negotiable.
How does your team respond to that? Because it is very, very structured at your facility.
It is. You know, my approach is, let's just do what we can and make sure it gets done. And if it gets done, then I'm fine. But as you know, in this industry, I mean, there's so many interruptions, so many interruptions. And so we can be working along on something, then all of a sudden we have a crisis we have to deal with, and then we forget that we had to finish that assessment and sign it. So a hard time to meet towards the end of the day allows people to have those interruptions, but then know that, you know, by 2:30, I've got to have this signed and dated, and I have to have this assessment completed. So that allows them then to sort of have those urgent situations, but then get back to it, because they know this time that we're going to have to be looking at where everybody is and what the status of all the MDSs are. And I think that that's been very effective and helpful actually for people. I don't know how appreciated it is always. In some ways, I think it is, because it does force people to get things done. And in other ways, it forces people to get things done.
Right. So who looks at all that at the end of the day?
You know, we have a great team. I have the assistant director of nursing, the director of nursing, the MDS coordinator, and whatever support staff they have, the social services, and sometimes the activities director, and myself. We all are in there at the same time, and we look at who's due. We look at, is it a quarterly, is it a mission? Did we get signatures done timely? What is left undone? And then we game plan, or we action plan who needs to do it by when, and so it will get done. Now, obviously, you know, from time to time, things slip through the cracks, but I think this really helps people stay on target.
You do that every day.
We have been doing that every day.
And do you see like a fruit of your labor?
We do.
I see your numbers, so
Yes.
I know what they're doing. But
Yes.
as administrator, do you feel like, okay, this is worth it? This is really helping.
Yes. Yes, 100%. Because what I've been doing, as you know, is having your team, before we hit submit on our MDSs, your team reviews those individuals, and they scour the chart and scour that that patient, and they look at it from an MDS and reimbursement perspective, both. And then we were able to respond to those audit findings. And then I was noticing, I'm a pattern person. So I was noticing on those audits, when they'd come through, we kind of have a pattern of certain things. So when I realized that we had a pattern of things that were kind of falling through the cracks, I'm like, those are the things that we need to tighten up, and what can we do to tighten that up? Which is kind of what inspired us to do the daily MDS meeting, so that those things didn't continue to get overlooked.
It definitely shows. It definitely shows in your reviews. They are probably the most finitely tuned reviews right now, because that's where we're at with your facility. We don't have to do the big, okay, wait a minute, hold on, you're not even compliant, so let's back up.
Yeah.
We're
I love
able
that.
to go, yeah, we're able to go in and say, okay, so this is likely, maybe or maybe not nitpicking, but we see these things, and you would want to correct these for somebody that's looking at your home.
Yes.
What do you feel like you guys do when you miss reimbursement? How do you handle that? Do you do another assessment, or how do you handle those missed opportunities?
Well, I mean, obviously we do what we can within ethical parameters, but, you know, we do what we can to make corrections prior to submission. So we do everything we can to identify issues or concerns or mistakes prior to submission, so we can make sure that that gets corrected before she even hits submit. If there is a missed opportunity, you know, we evaluate what happened and why did we miss it, and then we make adjustments in our system if we need to. Or if it's an individual concern, then we'll re-educate. It kind of depends on what the issue is, but we can definitely, you know, see patterns that way, and then target the root cause of those, and then address the root cause, rather than always just coming across with a blanket approach, because I don't like blankets that way. I just want to get to the bottom of what's going on. Is it individual or is it systemic? So
I think
we
what you're
take a look
doing
at
is
it that way.
effective. It's definitely effective in your building.
Awesome.
What kind of support or training do you provide for your MDS coordinators? And do you see a gray area? Does something stick out to you? I mean, I'm all the time running things up the chain as far as I can. When I have a gray area, Is there anything that sticks out to you, and how do you support your MDS people? I know you have more than one.
Yeah, my MDS coordinator, she's really wants to do what she can to capture things. She's very, sensitive to the clinical complexities that we have, how that relates to reimbursement. So any and all webinars, podcasts, and services that's made available, she finds them, and I definitely encourage her to participate in those, because we're always trying to make sure that we're understanding as much as we can, because it's literally so complex. I mean, you have to have a master's in trigonometry, I think, sometimes to be able to understand all this. But I just, I also encourage her to reach out to you to track down answers, to make sure that we're, taking a look at things the way, because you always have the regulations, and then you always have the intent of the regulations. And, depending on your surveyor, it could be any number of answers. So we want to really make sure that we are completely aware of exactly what it is that we're supposed to do in the event that somebody wants to audit or survey and decide, okay, well, I don't know about this. And then we can defend it easier, because we understand, the reg that is forcing that. So as much education as we can, I think that we do try to get our hands on that as much as we can, as much as possible. And then obviously consult with you if there is something that is a concern. And then, as I mentioned before, any educational material that comes out, because as you know, CMS revises things all the time. And, sometimes, the Medicaid system in the state, they're doing PDPM, but they're only doing the nursing component of PDPM. So any sort of material that comes out that is speaking to some of these changes or revisions or upgrades or overhauls, whatever you want to call it, every year, then we get together and meet as a team to make sure we review it and go through it and understand it to the best of our abilities, so that we
Right.
stay on top of it. And
sometimes they contradict themselves.
they do.
I recently just went through that with sepsis, and I still don't have a concrete definition. I can only repeat back to our clients what they have told us. And it is not black and white. So I wish it was.
It isn't. It really isn't. And then you have to decide, if you want to maximize your reimbursement, then it's very, very likely that you're going to take a hit in your quality measures, because they are just opposing forces.
Yes,
those are decisions that you have to make too, as well, internally.
That's
unfortunately.
True. That's true. That's true. Once you start increasing your CMI and taking a different set of residents, your QMs are definitely going to show that. Missouri starts using a different component of the HIP score. Are you ready for that? Like, if they add to it, because they've said at this time, we're only using the nursing component. They always say at this time. They could use a different, I have no idea what it would be. It might, I mean, it's speculated that it would be the NTAs, but I don't know. It might be one of the therapy components.
Right. Yeah, I feel like we're ready. Obviously, we would have to enhance our focus on some things, because, once you get locked into just looking at one particular component of the PDPM, then it's easy to just like, that it's not important, but that's not necessarily focus. So, but it is PDPM. And so obviously through Medicare, we're familiar with PDPM and all the components and what we need to do to capture what we need to try to capture for all of those components to maximize reimbursement. So hopefully we would be ready. I feel pretty confident with that. Who knows what they're going to do. I found it very interesting that they could just sort of, meaning the state of Missouri, just could deviate and just do one component. But I guess, they could. And for us, when we have high acuity patients, I think it benefited us. But for facilities that have a lot of behaviors, I don't know about how it benefited them,
Dee, if you could improve one thing about the current Medicaid or Medicare reimbursement process, what would that be?
I kind of think I would encourage the government to stop the moving targets, because that really puts providers at risk on the front end, because we can't catch up and we're leaving a lot of money on the table, and it's confusing, and, it's keeping things, it exposes us for, just that instability of it. And then it puts us at risk on the back end, because of that front end instability, because they're always changing it. Then they can come in, do the audit, say, nope, not done well enough, or you didn't validate this. And so we're going to recoup. It's just really scary, and it puts providers in an extremely vulnerable position. So hopefully they will let things stabilize and let us get familiar with these systems for a few years before they decide to continue to, overhaul it again.
I don't know about overhauling, but I do know there's changes coming again in October. So we can hang on and hope for the best, and just try to do our best and educate ourselves. that's the most we can all do. So thank you so much
Exactly.
for your time today, Dee. I appreciate you coming on this pod.
Yes,
And
thank you for asking me.
you're very welcome. Listeners, if you have any questions, reach out to me, Melinda at Renshaw Consulting. I'll be glad to help you. Thanks, everybody. Have a good week.